Men, do you ever feel like you just can't get ahead? Like you're misunderstood? Like you have no one to talk to that truly hears you?
And women, are you often frustrated, hurt, and saddened in your relationships with the men in your life?
What if there were a community of like-minded men going through the same challenges that would support, hear, and understand what you're going through?
Working together in unison to create understanding, intimacy, and strong connections. That's the Way of the Illuminated Warrior.
Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show is a forum of candid conversations for men and women about men. Being a man today is not always easy. Until now.
Okay, welcome to another adventure of the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. I'm your host, Waska, and today I have Sarah Vallely with me here today. And Sarah is a transformational and mindfulness coach. She's a lecturer, she does workshops, she's very present and mindful. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Waska. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this because my own personal practice in mindfulness has been pretty active for me for a few decades now, and I recognize the importance of having a daily practice. So I'll just start off by just saying, for me, mindfulness is really about being present in the moment, being here right now. Like even you and I just having this chat and this dialogue, like when you'll be speaking, I will do my best to just be listening to you, not thinking about what I'm going to say, not interjecting, not interrupting, and just really being like right here, right now in the present moment, being awake and aware. So that's my short version of mindfulness. How would you describe it?
Well, mindfulness is broken up into two parts, and one is the sitting practice. And specifically, the sitting practice is either single-pointed focus, which is focusing on a sound in your environment or physical sensations in your body, or your breath, which is a combination of physical sensations and sound, or if your eyes are open, looking at an object, and I always suggest something from nature, like a tree or a plant or fruit. So that's single-pointed focus, part of the sitting practice. The other type of sitting practice in mindfulness is called open awareness, and that's when we just sit there and observe our experience as if we're watching a movie, and we just notice whatever enters into our consciousness, whether that is a sound or physical sensation or a thought or an emotion. And ideally, you get to the point where you're doing both at the same time. You might be having your single pointed focus on your breath, while at the same time you're open to noticing what's coming into your consciousness. So that's a good description of the sitting practice. But the other half of mindfulness has nothing to do with a sitting practice. It's just like what you were talking about, is being mindful during the day. I like to refer to it as mindset. It's a mindful mindset. And two of the big pieces in that practice are being aware of your own thoughts. We have lots of different forms that our thoughts develop in. We have rumination, where we're thinking about the past and we're analyzing it, which can often lead to being self-critical. So it's really good to notice when we're in that kind of thought cycle during the day. Or we might be in worry, we might be in planning mode, making plans for the future, which, some of these things we have to do. We even have to reflect in the past sometimes, but we can use our mindfulness to notice when we're in excess, when we're doing it a little bit more than is healthy for us. And so being mindful of that. So that's a big part of the daily mindfulness practice. And the other is emotions, being aware of your emotions and using certain techniques to lean into those emotions in a healthy way so you can move into healing.
Yeah, great points. And the awareness, I think it's really all about the awareness. And, I think even the most practiced of us, we do think about the past. So I'm glad you brought that up. I tell the guys I work with a lot of times, it's like, it's not about perfection, it's just about practice and being present, and not to beat yourself up if you've only, sat and meditated, let's say, for 2 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is. Like, I was taught like any practice is good practice. So not to beat ourselves up. And yes, the past, there's nothing we could do about it. The future, as you said, we have to plan for it. But, for me anyway, like when I'm starting to feel like in my body, which I work with the chakras a lot with the guys, like, so if you're feeling it, blockage someplace in your body, for me, that's a telltale sign. Okay, I'm not being in the present. I'm usually worried about something, and I will focus my attention to here and now. And whether it's, sitting on my meditation cushion, which some days, I could go for an hour or two and it's beautiful bliss. And other days it's like, yeah, just can't get into it, and I remind myself also not to beat myself up. So it's, it is an ongoing practice, I definitely find. I want to ask you about vipassana meditation, if you're familiar with that, because that's one of the most really profound experiences that I've ever had. I think, back in 2015. I was up in Massachusetts at the Vipassana Retreat Center, and it was the minimum was a 10-day retreat. They'll do 30 days or even more, and it's obviously just being very focused on what the Buddha really came to call, and going from Siddhartha to the awakened Buddha is that vipassana, really experiential meditation. So if you have any stories or you'd like to share your experience with vipassana meditation, would be great.
Sure. Yeah. I love vipassana meditation, insight meditation. It is so good for addressing what's going on in our heads. It is what has been able to get me to a point where I get to the no self place. It's not something I do every day. I've done it a handful of times maybe in my life, but it's through that practice where I've truly been able to get to a point where I've completely forgotten who I am, who Sarah is. I don't exist anymore. And the way I experience it is, it seems like I'm overriding my own brain, because I often will focus on sounds. I don't like focusing on my breath. It's not how I practice. So I'll often listen to sounds. And so it might be a fan. And when I practice vipassana, which is, pretty much what I was explaining before with the single point of focus and the open awareness, is the part in my brain that tells me that that's a fan, I bypassed. Like there's no information coming to me telling me that I'm listening to a fan. And then the other information that I'm not getting anymore is that it's 10 feet away. So I don't know that it's a fan, and I don't know it's 10 feet away. So if you don't know those things, then you are the fan. Because if you can't distinguish any type of relational situation, a distance, you just become that. And so that's kind of a cool part of that practice. But I will tell you that and people can argue with me on this, it's fine, but I don't think Vipassana is the best approach to handling stress that's of the sympathetic nervous system. I think that Vipassana practice addresses perfectly stress that comes from our own thinking, those things that I was talking about, rumination, worry, those. But if we are triggered into fight or flight, we're having some real gut triggers, the Vipassana practice, it can take us down a few notches, but I don't feel that it really gets us into that calm place. And so those of you listening that practice mindfulness, or maybe a similar practice, something similar, sometimes you're stressed and you sit down and practice and your stress goes away. And then other times you sit down and practice and it's still there. And so it's my belief that those times when it's still there, it's because it's more physical, it's in your body. And so there's some other approaches I think they're a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a good point. My take on it is like whatever works for you. Like you don't have to sit cross-legged, on top of the mountain being the guru. Actually, that's a lot easier. Come down into the real world, dude. But seriously, it's I tell the guys that I work with, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be sitting on a mat or doing yoga or meditation in a traditional way. I'm sure Thich Nhat Hanh, who just recently passed. One of the things he said was, if you're doing the dishes, just do the dishes. And that was very profound for me, because I loved him for a very, very long time. And I took on that practice myself. And I taught it to my kids who were breaking a lot of dishes at the time, they're very young. And I'm like, just made it fun. Just focus, look at the bubbles, just use the sponge and just really be in that space of that's all you're doing. You're doing the dishes. You're not thinking about, which Pokemon card you're going to get or which, game you're going to play after that. Just be in that moment. And, so we had fun with it. And I think that works in a practical sense also, that it doesn't have to be what I've found a lot of guys that I work with, again, like they kind of turned off. I don't like meditation. I don't like breathing. I don't like yoga. I'm like, and it doesn't have to be this esoteric type of practice. It could be whatever works for you, with the parameters of it being like a focused intention of just de-stressing, of being present, of being aware of what's going on around and in you, and just, not stressing out over it. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, you definitely have to find what works for you. I do think it's important to have some practice to develop your concentration. Yeah. Concentration is a huge tool and can really help in so many circumstances. It's not all of it. There's so much more, but I do think that I think that's something that people stray away from the most, is the concentration part. So I do think that that's nice to get out of your comfort zone and try to challenge yourself on that one, because you'll reap a lot of benefits, such as sleep. If you have trouble sleeping, concentration is a great tool for that.
Yeah. So do you have a daily practice yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't actually practice every day, but definitely a few times a week. And it's, it's just a time for me to gain insights. That's the biggest thing that I get out of my practice, are the insights, to be able to understand on a better level why things are happening in my world. Just doing this for so long, I've gotten to the point that this brain in here, like, it's okay, but it's not really the best way to figure out what to do next, or how to come to a solution on a lot of problems. And I think that was a good lesson for me that I'm still working with, is because I am so logic based. There's so much. I think in spreadsheets. I'm just, if P then Q, it's just all of that. I'm a math person. So that's a good balance for me. So I think, kind of what we were talking about before, it's like, what is it that balances you out? Well, if you're a real logic person, then what balances you out is to move into more of a trust flowy energy, so you can just get these insights that aren't from you. And but then somebody who's just more naturally flowy and already in that flowy energy, maybe they need to use the practice to balance them to, with more of that concentration and kind of that yin yang kind of balance.
We'll be right back after this. Do you sometimes feel down, lost, or lonely? Are your finances feeling sluggish? Can your relationships use a healthy tune-up? Don't fear, bro. Help is here. Experience the benefits of connecting with other men who are going through similar challenges. Be supported in our safe, sacred, and inspiring monthly telecircle with the Brotherhood of the Illuminated Warriors. Connect with Waska for one-on-one mentoring, with the first session completely free. What have you got to lose? Check out illuminatedwarrior.com or send an email to waska@illuminatedwarrior.com. You're invited to step up your game and join us. You'll be glad you did. Yeah, it's definitely all about balance, because going too far one way, as we know, is not the healthiest way to be either. So if anybody that's listening, let's say, that does not really have any experience with what we're calling mindfulness, whether it's a regular practice of meditating or focused attention or any of the things we're saying. So what would you tell somebody that's like just a simple thing that they could do, and we'll say to alleviate stress, because that's been a huge thing I've been working with. I'm sure you have also, with clients since this pandemic started. Stress over finances, stress over relationships, stress over work, stress over everything, So what would you recommend somebody who's listening that they could do to just chill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, going back to that, the sitting practice of the open awareness and the single point of focus, something that's really helpful for that open awareness part of the practice, which is just noticing what's coming into your consciousness, is a practice in noting. And this is an old school mindfulness technique. And what we do with that is we actually name what we're noticing. And if we are in rumination, we name it rumination, for example. If we are making a list of the things that we want to do when we're not on our cushion meditating, you can name it list. I mean, you can name it whatever you want. What are some of the other things that you name? The planning, the overthinking, fantasy. Sometimes we go into fantasy thoughts, which take us out of the present moment. So naming it fantasy, naming emotions is helpful too for a little bit of different reasons. So we name the thoughts so we can not interact with them. So we can say, hi, rumination, I see you, but I'm not going to get involved and I'm not going to have you necessarily take over my experience, but I'm going to acknowledge you're there. And so that really kind of helps put some distance and you can be more of an observer. With the emotions, naming the emotions, that can be very healing, especially these authentic emotions of loss, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, things like that are really difficult. If we can be in our meditation and get there and allow that authenticity to come up, and we name it loss, for example, and we name it loss, it actually keeps us in it. Without, because what we naturally do, our mind gets involved and kind of sabotages that authentic experience and might pull us into more anger or resentment or shame or something like that. But if we can just kind of name the loss and be with it and comfort it like a baby almost, and then bring in that self-compassion and tell yourself, it's totally understandable that I'm feeling this loss right now. And even though I feel this loss, I'm loved. Even though I feel this loss, I'm worthy of that love. So that noting practice has been a huge game changer for my students and clients. And then, I guess one other tip would be, when you're sitting down, if it just means that you sit down for 15 minutes physically, like that's okay. If it just means that your body is physically still for 15 minutes, even though your mind is all over the place, that's okay. That you are at the stage where you're just training yourself to just sit still, and not worry about, what you're experiencing during that sit. I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's again, it's the practice, and it's and physiologically, there's definitely benefits to that as well. Like I said, even if your mind's going, just having your body hopefully in a state of stasis, and then slowly working into doing that with your mind as well, because it does take practice. I mean, I've been doing it for decades, and there's times where it's like it takes me a very long time, to get into that mode and really get the benefits from it. So it sounds like what you were sharing was really kind of like an acknowledgement and a validation of your feelings and emotions, which is very big for all of us in relationship to anybody, just to be validated and to be acknowledged. So it sounds like that's a really good practice as well. Something for me, which I find that I integrate into the teachings a lot also, is gratitude. And for myself, because I still have that monkey mind, even practicing all this time, and I could be laying in bed and not be able to fall asleep. And I'm like, I didn't say any prayers of gratitude for all the blessings I had from today. And no kidding, I don't remember anything after that, because as soon as I do that, I fall asleep. And it's like interesting that what they call the monkey mind, I will still get monkey mind on a regular basis, because I still have to remind myself, didn't say gratitude prayers, so you can't fall asleep, so it's a constant for me anyway. And a lot of the people I work with, it's a constant ongoing practice and reminder. And again, not beating ourselves up, but just having some kind of practice. So how do you feel about integrating gratitude into the practice?
Oh yeah. It's so important. And I joke around that, I make a living as a mindfulness coach and mindfulness teacher. And really, like, all you need is a gratitude partner that you text 3 things every night that you're grateful for. And that's all you need. You don't need me. You don't need to hire me, because it's that powerful. The gratitude practice is so, so powerful. So a big believer in that. And that's actually going back to when I was talking about how I don't necessarily believe a strict mindfulness practice addresses our sympathetic nervous system triggers as well. Gratitude is one of the things that does. So a gratitude practice I've found will really activate that parasympathetic system, which is our rest and digest, which calms us down. And as other affirmations can be really helpful as well, and breathing techniques. And I don't consider those to necessarily be mindfulness, but I definitely teach them. And what you were talking about with the relationships and how helpful this can be in relationships, a lot of times what happens with the people that I work with, and myself personally, is you find yourself feeling some anger, feeling some resentment, some of those tricky, I call them mental emotions. They're really of the mind. There's so much logic attached to them. And we find ourselves there. And then if we can have a practice in pulling ourselves into our heart and saying, okay, what is the true, authentic emotion that's really stems from, maybe that's rejection or loss or abandonment, something like that, and bringing yourself to that. And then you start to realize that it really doesn't have a lot to do with that person that triggered it in you. It's just this long pattern of loss and abandonment that you've been experiencing, a good part of your life. And so then in a relationship, it actually turns into this idea where you start to even be grateful for your partner who's bringing this stuff up for you, because it gives you a chance to take a look at it and move into some healing. So it's really wonderful to use mindfulness in this way in the relationship.
Yeah, that's a powerful point, because we don't always think that way, but it really is a blessing if we acknowledge that, yes, this person is tweaking me, they're pushing my buttons, they're challenging me. But that's only happening because most of the time it's a mirror anyway. And we usually need to work on whatever that issue is. And it's very easy to point fingers. I'm sure you've heard the saying, you're pointing one finger, you got, 3 pointing back at you, or 4 or 3. I don't know, but it's
shotguns
true.
or are we doing finger pointing?
But it's true. If we look at it as actually those challenges as a gift, that somebody's actually pointing something out that, of course, our ego is like, oh, that's not me, I don't want to hear that. But taking it from a more humble and present perspective, and working on those things, it really is. It's a great gift that we're given, and a lot of times we don't necessarily see it as that. But I think life is it's about elevating, and it's constant work, and there's always challenges. Few of the brothers that I work with, it's like, Waska, you've been saying for such a long time, the challenges. When are the challenges going to be over? I'm like. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be, dude. That's just life. And I honestly, just like I tell them, and I've told my kids, I do believe the challenges are the best opportunities for growth, because if everything's just like totally complacent and easy, and we really don't grow, we don't push ourselves, we don't stretch. So I think it's important to embrace those challenges. I'm not saying I enjoy them, but they're going to be there, and that's just life. So something else that comes to mind, what we're talking about here, which I think goes hand in hand with this, is forgiveness. Having forgiveness for self, and as well as forgiveness for other people, and that's a mindfulness practice as well. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think something that can help with that is moving the consciousness into your heart. And the practice that I teach and some of the philosophy behind it is that what is going on in the mind what is going on in our gut, our sympathetic nervous system, is distracting us from what's going on in the heart. So if we can really focus our intention on quieting the thoughts and really soothing our sympathetic nervous system, then we're going to be in a much better position to really just dwell in our heart, just be there. And that's where the forgiveness seems possible. Forgiveness isn't logical. It doesn't make sense a lot of the time. And so that's why the heart is so important, because the heart is not of logic. The heart is illogical. That's why our trauma resides in our heart, kind of settles in our heart, because there's nothing about trauma that's logical. And so it can't really, I mean, I know this is kind of an esoteric way to explain it, but it can't really like settle into your psyche because it's not logical. What settles into your psyche are these faulty pieces of logic that you create to try to make sense of the trauma, but trauma just will never make sense. So it settles in our heart. And so, yeah, so being in there and letting go of logic and being in a place of forgiveness and surrender. Surrender is such a huge part of the work and the practice, and moving into that heart and surrendering to whatever is there, whatever is not there, whatever is happening. And I think forgiveness and surrender go really well together, and getting to a place where you realize surrender is actually something positive. Yeah. Because, the average person is probably like, surrender. No, I will never give up. I will never, go down. I will never. And if you can get to that place and just feel safe about it, find the safety and security and surrender is a big turning point.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. A great book that comes to mind is Michael A. Singer's Surrender Experiment. If anybody's ever read that, it's really good. But that's something that I deal with, especially with guys, where we're, if I say to most guys, what's the first thing that pops into your head when I say surrender? And they think of the white flag and giving up and weakness and failing, and it's so far from the truth in so many different ways. Surrender to me, what I've learned is it's letting go. It's releasing all things that that aren't working for us anymore, and actually building something new. Because with every death, there's a new opportunity for rebirth. So surrender. That letting go and releasing, just even, with chemically, that letting, the cortisol leave your body and the endorphins kick in and all that good stuff. And then starting over from a place of neutrality and not feeling like you failed or you've given up or, you've surrendered in the traditional male sense of, well, he won and I lost. That's a mindset that definitely is an old paradigm that needs to go. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, that's powerful. Also, surrender. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed a theme with my male clients. Not every single male client, but majority of my male clients. The majority of their stress is caused from what I call the gut, and that's very connected with the sympathetic nervous system. But there are some energetic components to it, and just life experience components. But what seems to be kind of derailing most of the men that I work with is this feeling threatened emotionally by emotional stability, feeling like that whatever's happening might push them into a place where they won't be emotionally stable. Brings up a lot of fears and cuts them off from healing in a lot of situations. So that's a lot of work that we do, is helping them feel comfortable and safe and validated for feeling some of the emotions and knowing that that's not failure. Feeling your emotion isn't equivalent to feeling failure. And another big one is that's real tied to the gut work that we do is feeling a threat to your reputation, the way people perceive you. A lot can come up around that and interfere with the natural healing process. So that's a lot of the work that I do with men.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really great points, and I will totally concur and validate that. The gut and the sympathetic system, which are second chakra, or the svadhisthana, which are feminine. It's co-creative. So for guys, that's not a natural place for us to be. So a lot of the really important work for guys to do is, and ladies also, is to recognize when you hear the sacred feminine and divine masculine, that we both have these attributes and these elements in us, and to be able to balance them again with the balance and combine them and accept that it is a place of co-creativity, and our sexual organs are down there, and like you said, the sympathetic system and the gut being the second brain. Those are things that definitely relate a lot to the guys that I've worked with, to concur what you're saying. And also a lot of the fear-based things that you're saying, that's like the first chakra, the root chakra, where it's about safety and security and home, and that's another very valid point that you're making. That's a lot of guys deal with that as well. They don't feel secure in their relationships and their finances, and all these things are tied together. So the work is super important. So thank you for doing the work that you do with men and women and your mindfulness practices. And so before we wrap up, you've shared some really great information. What would you like to leave the audience with? What kind of, you've already given a lot of good pearls of wisdom, but, if you had, just a few minutes to share with somebody who's saying, hey, Sarah, I need some help being mindful. What do you suggest?
Well, I teach a specific type of practice called TSD mindfulness, which is T for tame, S for soothe, and D for dwell. And so that's a practice in taming the mind, soothing the gut, and dwelling the heart. And what that does for people is you learn to identify where your stress is rooted in. Is it rooted in the mind and the thinking, or is it rooted in the gut with some of those survival triggers, or is the stress rooted in our heart? We actually have stress that's rooted in our heart, and that's from past trauma. And so whatever you're learning in your spiritual practice, if you can make sure that you are using that spiritual practice to tune in to understand where your stress is originating from, because depending on where it's originating from, we can use a little bit different tactic for soothing ourselves, for bringing us into balance, for healing ourselves. So I think that's really important. And then the self-compassion piece is just so key. And most of the people that I talk to about self-compassion who are doing it say that it felt really weird when they started, because to say to yourself, it's understandable that I'm feeling this way, or I'm loved, even, that I'm in these circumstances, I'm still loved. Like, it just felt so weird to say that. And then people who haven't been practicing self-compassion, say that it feels a little bit uncomfortable to say those self-compassion statements. So that's another something that I can share with you, is to just lean into that discomfort. And it feels weird, but if you just stick with it, within a few weeks, you'll just start to own it more and be like, oh yeah, wow, I really am loved, and I'm worthy of that love, and totally validated in all these different emotions that I'm having. And I'm not a lesser of a person because of these thoughts I'm having. And that is such a shift, and can really put our energy into a much more balanced, comfortable place.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, because it really does all begin with self-love. We can't expect anybody to love us, or us to love really fully and authentically anybody else, if we don't love ourselves. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So so share with the audience where they can reach you if they'd like to connect with you.
Yeah, my website is tsdmind.org. So that's T as in tame, S as in soothe, D as in dwell, mind as in mindfulness.org. And they can reach me there. I offer classes. I have a 6-week series of classes that I often have. I have retreats. I have a self-compassion retreat coming up, and I do private one-on-one coaching, which is really powerful. Even in just 4 sessions, my clients can really have an extremely transformative healing experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. And all that information will be in the show notes. So I hope the audience got some good information from this little talk of ours. So, Sarah's available. I am available. This is what we do. We share the love, so to speak, and offer healing and mindfulness. So thank you for joining me today, Sarah. It was wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So until next time, continue to illuminate our paths with loving kindness.
Visit IlluminatedWarrior.com if you'd like to go deeper and find out more about what's available within the Illuminated Warrior Men's Transformational Community. Tune in next time for more candid conversations for men and women about men on the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. Until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.